Welcome to the Modern Classrooms Project podcast. Each week, we bring you discussions with educators on how they use blended, self-paced, and mastery-based learning to better serve their students. We believe teachers learn best from each other, so this is our way of lifting up the voices of leaders and innovators in our community. This is the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 210 of the Modern Classrooms podcast. My name is Toni Rose, and they, them pronouns, a designated hype person here at MCP, and I am joined by a fast-track DMCE, Distinguished Modern Classroom Educator, aspiring MCP expert, mentor, and self-proclaimed competitive speed puzzler, Sabrina Monserate-Lindsay. What a fantastic bio. Welcome, Sabrina.
Hi, hello. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so exciting to be in this space with you. And thank you so much for saying yes to the podcast. I know that this is our first time actually connecting with each other. So I'm really excited to hear your stories and hopefully elevate some of the ideas that you have in your classrooms. And so before we get started, what is bringing you joy currently?
I have a chocolate cake in my fridge right now from Costco. I'm heartbroken because they've changed the formula. So like there's chocolate mousse in the middle now versus just like strictly chocolate cake. But it's just me and my husband. So that's why it's bringing me joy. So I do not have to share at all.
I love that so much. And I feel like companies are changing ingredients and changing recipes for a lot of things, and not even just like food to eat, but even like my chapstick has changed. And I hate that. It's the worst.
Yes, especially like size as well. Like the size of things is just shrinking, but you know, that's a whole other conversation.
But you know, honestly, Costco itself is what brings me joy. It's definitely my second favorite place in the world.
It's definitely my go-to place to food shop.
It's just so fun. And my sister and I complain all the time about how much money we spend at Costco because we literally just like put whatever we want. And like you, we don't have kids either, right? So we're just like, oh, we want a pillow. The pillow's on sale, so we'll get 3.
And now they got Legos too. Like if you go to the toy section,
yeah,
it's a
definitely.
For
so
sure.
Listeners, if you know, you know. I feel like we're getting at that age where it's like Costco. I love that so much. So thank you for sharing that. Tell us more about who you are and how you started your MCP journey.
Yeah, so this is my current 6th year of teaching. And so my first year of teaching was actually like 2019, 2020. So like I got the first in-person experience at the tail end of 2019, but then, you know, March 2020 happened. And so we went virtual. So where MCP came in is after the 2020 school year, my school went full virtual. Like we went completely virtual, like Zoom meetings, Canvas, the whole shebang. And so we very, very quickly had to adapt our ed tech skills. And so that's where I became really proficient with like recording videos and like doing editing for those videos and like using Desmos, like just a bunch of tech tools to try to make my math classroom as engaging as possible. And with that, I kind of became like the tech person for like math department. Like I became the go-to person who knew how to do tech. And so when we returned to in-person learning, our district actually received funding to kind of reincorporate the class called Foundations of Math 1. So there were huge learning gaps from COVID. And so with that funding, we were able to hire on another teacher to like explicitly dedicate to students who had those learning gaps to get them back on pace. But what ended up happening is me and my math department head, Danielle Hamilton, she approached me and was like, hey, let's tag team this course together. And we're going to use something called the Modern Classroom Project. It was over the summer. She sent me an email. I literally had not seen this woman for like a year and a half. And was just like, if we're going to do like foundations, we got to do it right. And so I ended up doing the free MCP course and I fell in love. Like she had this vision that like, okay, if they're going to be taking 2 math classes anyway, let's make it different and make it different by providing additional support. And so that's kind of where it ended up. So I've been doing MCP in my classroom for Foundations of Math 1 for the last 3 years. And every single year I fall more and more in love with it because the benefits are really like reaping the rewards. If I can just add on like something that I want to celebrate is last year, my district started involving the Modern Classroom Project. So there's now an official collaboration with them. And so they had reps visiting schools. And I guess we must have been doing a really good job. And so at some point, I had MCP reps come to my classroom just spontaneously, presumably because they were working with another teacher that day and had heard what we were doing. And what they saw in their visit, it earned me automatic credentials for the Distinguished Modern Classroom Educator. So I was really, 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 really proud of that. And then because I got the DMCE credential, I got exposed to being an expert mentor. And because I've been so passionate about MCP, I was so excited. I had immediately applied over the summer, and then I got accepted. But the school year has just been so crazy that I just had to put it on hold for right now. So MCP has been really, really kind and understanding about letting me join a future cohort to be an expert mentor. And so I'm really, really looking forward to that once everything settles.
Okay, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
How exciting. I'm always talking about how we need more mentors, right? Like who look like me, honestly. So this is really exciting news. And so congratulations. That's really dope. So when you were talking about your math lead, Danielle Hamilton, right?
Yeah.
Was she aware of Modern Classrooms, or were you the one who put her on?
She was the one who put me onto it.
Got it.
And so I don't remember where she found it, but this was maybe like 2020, 2021, like the summer before. And so she's the one who approached me with it.
And a follow-up question is that you started teaching in 2019, 2020.
Yes.
So really you're like a brand new teacher-ish, right?
Oh yeah. I had never had a full, like, quote unquote normal year. Like the year that I started MCP was like my third year of teaching.
That is wild. So I guess like I would love to hear your perspective, right? Because 2019, 2020, COVID happened, right? Like half of the semester you were in class, half you were out, and then like trying to just survive out here because it was a mess. It was messy, right? And beautiful at the same time. Messy, beautiful, all the things, right? How did you, I guess, like, perspective mindset wise, right? You're like, okay, I just had my first year teaching. COVID happened. I know that I have to do all of these things. How did you come into acceptance, I guess, or just embracing like, hey, I did my first year of teaching this way, but then I'm going to implement Modern Classroom, which is a little bit different. I'm assuming, right? How did that feel for you as a brand new-ish teacher, as well as like just with COVID happening, like everything? Tell me all the things. You have so many layers here.
So I guess the biggest thing why I felt so comfortable jumping into MCP to start with was because of my math department head, Danielle Hamilton. Even with the first 2 years working with her, I had implicit trust about, like, she knew, like, anytime Danielle came with an idea, I knew it was for the benefit for the kids and also for the benefit of us. And so I would immediately jump on. So like when she approached me and I was like, okay. But also a big part of it is how do I say this? I want to be humble about it, but I feel like being a teacher, one of the main skills that you could use is being adaptable, right? And like being flexible, and considering the fact every single year of my teaching career at that point looked totally different. Like I was just like, all right, might as well throw me into another piece of chaos. Like, let's just figure out how it works. And so I think it was really just the support of my department head, but also the willingness to try something new because everything was crazy anyway.
Yeah. And I was also going to say too, Sabrina, like, no, don't be humble, like brag, right? Like we want to brag about that. I don't think as a society we brag enough. Like there's arrogance. We don't want arrogant, right? But we want to be able to like brag about our strengths and like what we bring to the table. And I do love this concept as a newer teacher, right? Like a newish teacher of just like, you know what? I had to be adaptable because I knew it was going to be different every year moving forward, right? And so kudos to you for naming that. That's really important, right? Because we do want to keep being adaptable and changing because things change all the time. And I was also chuckling too at the fact that, you know, you said it's chaotic. It is chaotic. Teaching is chaotic. And I think that's what makes it fun. And also I think I thrived so well. I just was thriving in a teaching position because I had ADHD. So knowing that like, or I have ADHD. So it's like, oh, I could do 10 million things together all at the same time. That's why I was so good at it.
Really harping on multitasking skills here.
Right? Like, shout out to my neurodivergence. Thank you for letting me handle my middle schoolers the way that I handled it, right? Beautifully is how I would say it, honestly. So thank you for sharing that. That's really impactful and powerful. And, I was also thinking about having a teacher who was newish, right, to teaching, and then and hearing their stories about how they implemented the model. So this is actually, the universe always provides. This is beautiful. So yay. Okay. So again, shout out to Danielle Hamilton. I hope you're listening to this because we're we're just celebrating. Okay, great. So Sabrina, when we're talking about student engagement, right? You had your first year of teaching and then you went all virtual and then now in-person setting. So how have you seen student engagement change since implementing the model? And then are there any strategies or techniques that have been particularly effective in keeping students motivated and involved? Because this is a question that we always get asked, and especially if it's virtual spaces, right? Because it's like, oh, how do I get students to engage? So yeah, share all the things.
So how do I say this? There's a saying of like the first pancake, right? Like, whenever you're making pancakes, the first one always looks trash. She's not the cutest. She may be edible, but she's not the cutest. I think that was like my first 2 years of MCP because building up the curriculum, building up the resources, building materials, it does take time. But I think now that I'm on my third-ish iteration, it's beautiful, right? And so I think that I have found the key here to be most effective for me is to really have a predictive classroom structure, right? So to give some context, at my school, it is a not year-round, but it is year-long classes and students have 7 periods a day. So I see the same students 5 days a week for 48 minutes. And because they're dual enrolled in a Math 1 class, like a regular, there's my cat, a regular Math 1 class, it was actually really, really important to me to provide variety and diversity in what they were seeing, right? Like I didn't want to give them double up where the teacher was already talking in their first one, and then they come to me and I talk to them some more. And so MCP was able to give me that variety that I was looking for to be supportive. But going back to the idea of predictive classroom structures, like the way that I get my 9th graders locked in is that quick 3-minute warm up at the start of class. Like as soon as they come in, it is my expectation that they have their folder on their desk, they take out their Chromebook, they have their warm up out, and they know that as soon as that bell rings, I'm immediately flipping to the warm up and they have 3 minutes. And so going ahead and setting that expectation that when we are in class, we are productive has really been really, really helpful for this school year. But then also just having that consistent transition of like, okay, after my warm up, now I'm going to do my lessons, right? And then while I'm doing my lessons, my teacher is going to be checking in with other people, and my teacher may not be available to me right now. So like, I got to do my lessons. Otherwise, like I'm like sitting there twiddling my thumbs. So that's one strategy. So predictive classroom structure. The other thing that I find is like just being real with my students about why I have my classroom set up the same way. Right? Just like being totally honest that I'm giving you videos because I want to be supportive to you and have one-on-one conversations. I cannot have one-on-one conversations with everybody. And so by everyone doing the video and doing the guided notes and doing their practice and working independently, that's what gives me the privilege to be able to talk to you for like 5, 10, 15 minutes, like however long it needs for me to clarify your questions. So like having that expectation of after you do the warm-up, the teacher's already kind of like focused on other students. So it's like your responsibility to do what you need to do to be on pace. And then the last one, they're high schoolers, they're students, like positive reinforcement. So I'm a very, very smiley, happy teacher. I don't know if you can tell. But at the beginning of the year, I am very, very quick to randomly award like small trinkets, small candies to students who are doing things that I want them to do. Like I'll pull out my candy bin and give it out to the student who got their stuff out before the bell rang. Like I'll give them a Starburst for, I don't know, giving me their resources without me prompting them. So different ways to encourage behavior, but then also make it super obvious to everybody else that it's happening. Like, oh my gosh, like so-and-so has all their stuff ready and I didn't have to tell him. Thank you so much. Here's a dum-dum. And so now I don't do that often, but like it helps build in that routine of like, I have expectations, you should be doing things. If you want a reward, I guess in their mind, do this. But then also, I think this is the biggest one that I've implemented this year is just like loudly thanking students for helping me support another classmate. So I have the public pacing tracker during class. And so if I'm busy with another student and I can tell someone's been waiting for a really long time, I'll go, hey, so-and-so, I know you mastered this lesson. Can you help me help so-and-so while I finish up this conversation? And then afterwards, I'll follow up with them. And if that person was able to get their question answered, I'm like, I told you they were great, right? Like, see, you were able to help me out. Like, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. But those are the main strategies that I have. So having a predictive classroom structure, being totally honest with students, but then also encouraging and rewarding students for the behaviors that you want.
You know, Sabrina, I love this phrase that you're using of predictive classroom structure, right? I'm always saying too that we want learning to be predictable in a sense where students know what they're doing as opposed to pop quiz here, pop quiz there. Because I feel like that creates a lot more tension and a lot more stress with students. And so when a classroom structure is predictable, right? There's a routine there. Students feel a lot more comfortable and a lot safer to navigate these learning challenges and experiences that they may have in the classroom. So I really love this. Now, I do have to ask, how long did it take for you and your students to get that routine done?
We're only 3 weeks into the classroom and they already had it down by week 2.
Beautiful.
I think a big part of it though was just, I think it's the follow through, right? When you're a first, second year teacher, you're very earlier into your career. Like it feels wrong to like call someone out. You know what I mean? If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But just like making a neutral statement, like, I need you to take out your stuff. Like, our stuff should be out already. Like, it's incredibly effective. Because once you make that statement out loud to everybody else is like, oh, I got to get my things ready. Otherwise, I'm going to be the one that Ms. Monserate is talking to.
Yeah. And I really like the focus on the why too. This whole concept of being real. Let's be real because, honestly, like everybody hates someone who's trying to be fake. Let's be honest here, right? Yeah. And so when we're thinking about being real, it's really providing this space again to have a conversation of, hey, this is why we're doing this, right? And I think as human beings, it is very much a natural desire to know why we are doing the things that we are doing. Why is this important? Why do we have to do it this way? Why do we have to do it that way? Right. And so I think, again, thank you for naming that whole concept of just be real, right? We want to be as authentic as we can be in the spaces that we're in, especially with students. And I also really like that you stated you have rewards for students who are doing the things without prompting, right? And I can already, I've done this as well in the beginning of my classroom experience and quickly realized I don't have the budget for this. Actually, I'm not buying anything anymore.
It is inconsistent. It is inconsistent and random.
Yes. And that I think is beautiful to make it random. So it's not that every single time students get a reward. It's more so they never know. So you're keeping them on their toes. And I mean, I may have gone to Costco earlier this week and gotten some Starburst, and then maybe I have some to give out. You know what I'm saying? So we never, because that's what I did throughout like my tenure of teaching. Like in the beginning, I had a lot, and then I was like, bruh, who's spending all this money? Like, no. There's also better ways to internally motivate students as opposed to continuing that. And then I think and you did a really good job of shifting, right? Like you went from, hey, there were little rewards for students, and then also saying, it could just be as easy as loudly thanking and loudly acknowledging students, right? The positive reinforcement goes such a long way, not just for students, also for adults, right? And so I think sometimes when I have conversations with educators, I also think like, hey, what would you like? What would you have liked if you were in this classroom? You want to be seen, you want to be acknowledged, you want to be celebrated. And so providing that opportunity to really name and celebrate the wins, even if it's so tiny, right? And I think also instead of focusing on the, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to meet with you, right? There's that apology piece. I think it's even better for me anyway, in my opinion, Sabrina, to say, thank you so much for waiting. Right? Because now there's like, you know what? I appreciate you. I see that you've been waiting. And because of that, I appreciate it. Right? Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your flexibility. Thank you for blank, right? Instead of saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I didn't get to whatever, right? It's just shifting it from like, I'm sorry to thank you for recognizing a positive thing that they are doing. And so yes, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I just really appreciate this predictive classroom structure. I think I'm just hyper focusing on that now. So Sabrina, I have a follow-up question. And I know this is not part of our conversation. I'm curious though. I can hear people say, or just concerns, right? I can hear concerns saying, well, predictive classroom structure is great and all, but how do you ensure that they don't get bored, that students don't get bored, that students want to keep working instead of, or not working, but want to keep learning instead of not, right? So how do you kind of mix it up? Because you were talking about creating different ways to teach and learn, right? So how do you ensure, and I know you're 3 weeks in, so what are your thoughts on this?
So I have found that when I did the first 2 years of MCP first year really, of just like strictly watching videos and then repeating again and again until the test came, that my 9th graders hated it. Like it was too predictable, like it was too repetitive, it got too boring. And so I started learning to incorporate more days like where we can play games as like a whole class. So rather than focusing on the individual progression, bringing everybody together as a community. So, like, for example, the day before a test, I always have review games. Like just yesterday, we all played a Kahoot together, like just competing. But I also incorporated a day where I said, hey, everybody needs to be on lesson 4 by this day so that I can talk to you guys about a difficult topic that many students struggle with. And so not only do I just do the videos, but also I still teach in front of the class, and that's something that they've enjoyed. Another way that I often do it is I'll have days where we can kind of just chill out. Right. So if you are currently ahead of pace right now, you have earned the right to sit in my bungee chair. Or if you are ahead of pace right now, I'm willing to award you with the opportunity like of a snack of choice for you to be my peer tutor. But yeah, those are the things that can come to mind.
Yeah, and those are great. Those are really great, actually, because it's a good reminder for folks who are listening that just because you're implementing the model doesn't necessarily mean you don't have whole class lessons.
Yeah.
I definitely still had whole class lessons, and sometimes what I would do, honestly, is we would watch the video together as a whole class.
Oh yeah, I do that at the beginning
pause.
of the year too.
Yeah, I would pause and then say, okay, let's talk about it. Because I know my 6th graders really struggled with thesis statements. And so that was something that I was like, you know what, let's work on this together as a whole group. And the students really loved that, right? So really mixing it up, because like Sabrina said, it can become too predictable. And if that's the case, then students start falling out. They become less engaged, less motivated. And so really mixing it up. And I think this is where, again, the chaos is welcomed and invited into the space sometimes, right? So I love this whole you reflecting back of like first year you did this and then second year. Okay, you go for it. There's something
I forgot. One thing that I started this year is I actually pull small groups on some days. So if I see a section or a group of students who are all in the same lesson and have been on the same lesson, like that's also another way that I remembered I provide variety. It's like, hey, y'all, let's all meet up over here in front of the board. Let's talk about this and go through the lesson together.
Yes, exactly. The small group, and I think that's what this model provides, opens up space and opportunities for, is those small groups, those one-on-one connections as well. And I know that you have said like you get to interact with students and have those one-on-one conversations and to really just dive deeper into what they actually know. So that's really exciting too. I know I've heard educators, again and again about just, hey, we have a lot of groups work, right? There's even times I know in my classroom, there were hardly any individual work. Like the only individual work was really mastery check, but they could watch the videos together. They could do the practice together. But then when it was mastery checks, like, nah, bro, you gonna sit still for 5 minutes. Like you've had the whole 50 minutes to go off the wall and do whatever you need to do. But these 5 minutes of mastery check, you got to do on your own. Right. So, and that really, again, provides students to really interact with each other, collaborate with each other. And again, those are skills that we need to create opportunities for students to utilize. Okay, great. So now we've been talking about diversifying lessons and how you teach, right? So can you share some examples of how you were able to continue differentiating instruction more effectively, specifically in this model? And then also, how does it allow you to cater to students with diverse learning styles and needs? And I know you've talked about small groups already. I know you've talked about one-on-one check-ins. Is there anything else that you want to add on?
I don't think so. Because I think really a lot of my differentiation in my conversation comes when I get to have one-on-ones with students. Like, I think it's like reasonable, or I guess it's my minimum expectation that you watch the video first. But of course, at the beginning of the year, I'll always have students who like say they hate watching videos. So like, why am I watching this ed puzzle? Like, why are you making me do this? And for those students, I also give them the option to say like, okay, like just watch it one time. And if you really, really hate it, I will talk you through it. And usually once they realize that they have to maybe wait for me a little bit, once they finish that video to like talk through, because I'm talking to somebody else, they kind of intuitively go, oh, right, well, I watched the video and I do actually kind of understand what's going on. So I'm just going to do the practice and wait for Ms. Monserate to come back. But there have been a handful of times where, especially if students are really absent for several days, like because everybody is already working on their lessons independently, like I'm able to work one-on-one with that student for an extended time because that expectation of everybody is being productive has already been set.
Yeah, and I think it works really well specifically for those students who cannot be in school for whatever reason.
And I tell them at the start of the year, I was like, y'all, this entire unit's posted. Like all of the lesson materials are there. You can grab as many papers as you want. I don't recommend it, like go lesson by lesson. But if you're ever absent, like you don't need to technically be in the classroom to get caught up in your work. All of my stuff is there.
Yeah. And then also, right, teachers can be absent.
Yeah. Which the subs love, by the way. Every year I have the exact same lesson plan for those class periods for Foundations of Math 1. The students know what they need to do.
Yes.
The students already know. And I've had minimal complaints about subs have to take over anything. I never have to worry about Foundations.
Yeah. And I was also... Now I'm thinking, man, I really need to have a sub on the podcast to talk about their experience as well, because I've had the same with subs for my classes, right? They'd be like, oh no, put me in a class where there's MCP because I know that students know exactly what to do. Yeah. And I think the beauty of it too is that my sub plan really is students know what they're supposed to do in the pacing tracker. And then I say, if you really have any other questions, clarifying questions, here's like a teacher, like a student teacher. And then I would have conversations with that student and be like, hey, I'm going to be out for the next 3 days. I'm banking on you to kind of help our sub out. And they love that too. Like it's so great. It
empowers them too. Like I've done the same thing too when I've been absent. I'm just like, hey, I'm not going to be here. You're my buddy. Okay. You're going to be the one to answer questions and I'm going to post it in Canvas that you were the person.
Yes.
They're like, okay.
They celebrate that too. It's kind of like a badge of honor, right?
It is.
One of the things too that I was thinking about, Sabrina, when you mentioned instructional videos and how students at the beginning at first are just resistant to it. And my initial response was, I bet they have a TikTok. And I bet that they do a lot of micro learning from their TikTok videos. And so I feel like if I were in the classroom, I would just name that, like, hey, who watches TikTok videos? Who've seen TikTok videos?
Who's still watching YouTube, by the way? Like,
right. And that's the thing. YouTube Shorts are a thing. There's Reels. So if it's not even TikTok, there's Reels. Facebook also has, there's videos everywhere, right? And we're constantly consuming things with videos. And I think students sometimes see that as there's a difference, right? Like, oh, this is an instructional video, so I hate videos. It's like, no, you don't hate videos. I think there's just like a barrier of like how you perceive school to be. And that's why there's such a tension and resistance to that. And I'm hoping, there's really one of my hopes for this model is that we're shifting that a little bit, right? And putting more joy in our learning, because learning is fun. And so, I mean, you teach 9th grade, 10th grade, like math. Have they been exposed to this model already, or is it their first time?
So I think there are a few other teachers at my school who do MCP. So I think in terms, I don't know, because by the time they get to me, I'm not sure if they've had experience with it before. I usually ask them at the beginning of the year, like, hey, has anyone had any classes where like most of the instruction is through videos? And I get kind of like inconsistent responses, I guess. So I don't know if it's as popularized right now before lower than 9th grade.
I mean, like you said too, with COVID happening, right? There was a forced shift to creating videos. And I think we just didn't have those quote unquote best practices of instructional videos. And so for the students who were exposed to those instructional videos and then learning that they're 30 minutes long, 45 minutes long,
no.
Right? then I can understand why there's hesitance again, right? About instructional videos. So, okay, yes. All of that makes sense. Okay, so let's shift a little bit to mastery-based learning. What changes have you made to your assessment practices to align with mastery-based learning? And then how do you ensure that like your students truly understand the concept, the material before moving on to the next topic?
So for context, bringing it back to the idea that my students in Foundations are dual enrolled in their regular Math 1 class, like the way that I give my lessons, I show them the content before they see it in the regular Math 1 class. So there's like an inherent incentive to do the work in my class. And I repeatedly say this, like I need you to do it now so that when you see it in Math 1 later, you get to be the one who knows what's going on. But also what I've done for mastery-based grading is I guess the first year, I only had maybe 2 versions of a mastery check for math content. And I had rampant cheating. Like cheating was a huge, huge issue for me. And so I started adding more and more versions. And where I'm currently at in my iteration is that mastery checks are one individual. They are completely closed notes. And I actually have them turn in their lesson materials to me. So like you're not allowed to have your phone. That's a school rule anyway. But I have them turn in their guided notes, their practice, everything to me. And I hold on to them as like a trade. Like, you do not get this graded mastery check until you trade in your lesson materials. And I've found that to be really, really effective, because when I grade their stuff and I see something that's like very, very wrong, I can go back into their notes and I can see that like, hey, it's because they skipped the problem. they skipped the problem that was related to that idea. And so when I next see them, I point it out. I'm like, hey, I really need you to actually try on the practice and check your work as you go, and I'll show them like, this is the exact same problem, just with different numerical values. And so I encourage them and I say, hey, like, I really want to help you. Like, the whole point of me doing modern classrooms or this type of classroom structure is I want to be able to have conversations with you. And if you don't tell me that you don't know something or you don't express your needs, like, I'm not going to be able to support you in the best way that I can. And I don't want you to be confused. So like, let me help you. That's usually how I go about those conversations. But one other thing that I like to do when it comes to mastery-based grading to sort of like promote the idea of like recognizing their mistakes, I do try to ask them before they do a revision whether or not they want assistance. So a big part of my class is I want to help build their math confidence. So if I give them a paper and I say like the question 1 is wrong, I'll ask them like, hey, do you want to figure it out together, or do you want to find the mistake yourself? And so I'm hoping that's promoting self-advocacy, right? So if I'm explicitly asking them that question, they get to reflect on their needs and see whether or not they actually want the support. But it also opens up the conversation so that they don't have to like admit that they like don't know what's going on. Like by introducing it, that gives them like a free pass basically to ask what they need.
And I love that concept of, hey, do you need support? Or here are ways for you to get more support. Just like you said, right? Because there's a lot of, I don't want to say shame, but with high school, middle school, right? They want to look cool or whatever it is that they want to do. And asking for help is something that they definitely need a lot of help on, right? Like even as adults, we struggle to ask for help. And so giving them this agency and again, this skill set to be able to ask and admit and acknowledge, oh, I actually don't understand, so I need help with this, is really important. And so I do want to ask about the timing of mastery checks, right? So you say you take up all of the lesson materials that they have. Are they able to take the mastery checks whenever they're just finished with the lessons? And then how do you keep your sanity? How does that work?
I should clarify. So I have a bin on my front desk where they throw in their guided notes, and they also, when they're finished with their mastery checks, that's the same bin that they put it in. During class, I'm not actively grading unless I have downtime, and I guess like students are kind of like working their things, then I'll pull it. But usually there's like a 1 class period turnaround time or like 1 day turnaround time for revisions. So I'll tell them like, don't expect a response right now. Like I'll get it back to you tomorrow. So I'm grading mastery checks pretty frequently. But I think what helps me to, I guess, reduce the amount of mistakes that I see in their mastery checks is just like really at the very beginning of the year, like harping on the idea, like do your practice, check your work, make sure you're good. Like don't do the mastery check until you feel like you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because I know from my own practice, the different quarters that we had, we changed the model so much. We had different iterations just to see what works and what doesn't work. And when we transitioned to virtual, our mastery checks were due on Thursday. So Thursday was the day that you did your mastery checks. And then therefore they still had self-pacing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, everybody was doing their mastery check. So that is just one way also that our listeners could implement that so that it doesn't get too overwhelming of like, oh, I had 5 people turn in this day and then I have 6 turn in this way. And then now they have to make revisions. And, there's just a lot of logistics that you can think about. And I know Monty also did hers on Fridays, like her mastery checks were on Fridays. And so just thinking about ways on how to keep your sanity, right? Okay, Sabrina, I have a question. Why no notes for mastery checks?
I need them to actually, how do I say this? I feel like notes in mathematics, it's definitely like a security blanket. Like it is I have my notes, that means I'm okay. But I want them to shift their trust into the notes, into themselves, right? Like I make it closed notes because I want them to feel like they have the confidence to get it done. And so by giving me their notes, they're sort of like relinquishing the power that having notes access has.
Interesting.
And so that's why I say, like, don't give me your notes until you've had an opportunity to practice. Like the mastery check will really let me know whether or not you understand. And so when they make a mistake, they recognize like, okay, maybe I wasn't paying attention, or like maybe I made like a careless error. But what I have found is because I just started this year and I've had such really high expectations, most of the time students are able to like point out their mistakes and be like, oh, okay, yeah, let me try it again. Let me try it one more time. They're actually very open to trying again, which is a new attitude that I'm welcoming and like really excited about. And so when I ask a student, like, even though they have quote unquote mastered the topic by getting it right, I'll ask them, hey, do you want another one just to be sure? A lot of them say yes.
Really?
A lot of them say yes. Like even like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps. Like one student today, she came to me during lunch tutoring and she was finally able to do a question without assistance. And I was like, okay, do you want to do one more just to be sure? She was like, yeah. Let me just make sure that I do so. And it's been great. It's been great.
All right, Sabrina, clearly you're expanding my brain. And my brain literally just exploded because in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, we have guided notes. So why won't we let our students use them for mastery checks? And you just crumbled that belief for me because you just said, I don't want them to be dependent on this piece of paper. I want them to be dependent on themselves and really just work on this confidence. And, we often talk about how people are afraid of math. And I really want to, and I also want to say it's probably because of how it was taught, honestly, right? Math is scary because there was just very little room to make mistakes. Like you have to get it. If you don't get it, then you're labeled a certain way or whatever. And so for you to just say like, hey, you have your guided notes for practice. You can use your guided notes for practice as often as you would like. That is totally okay. For mastery checks though, like I want to make sure that you have processed that learning inside your brain so that you're not having to depend on a piece of paper. And it's a way to say also, yo, believe in yourself. You got this. You did the work, so you got it. And I love that. Oh my God.
Yes, there's a lot of praise that happens when they master it. I'm like, fantastic job. Like, perfect. You did it great. Like, there's a lot of positive reinforcement happening in my classroom.
Okay, so I have another question. Again, we're deviating, and that's okay because I'm just so enthralled, right? Okay, so when students don't master it the first time, they of course can revise, redo it. Can they have access to their guided notes then?
Oh yeah, I give it back to them. So usually the first try is where I go close notes, and then at the beginning of the year, I go like, hey, if you want to revise this, the notes will be here, but I want to encourage you not to check it. Like, I want to encourage you to not try to utilize it. Going back to the idea that it's like, I want you to build trust in yourself. Like, this information, like trust yourself, trust your intuition. And a lot of times when I see them mastery checking, the notes, maybe, they do a little quick peek, but they're not like directly copying like they were when they were doing practice.
Oh, I love that so much because, I'm also thinking about my brain, right? My brain is going 150 miles per hour and sometimes I just forget. And so like, I would love the opportunity to look back at my notes to make sure that, you know what, I do have this. I have it. I need reassurance for my paper that I have it. So I love this concept of yes, it's available. The first try, really don't want you to look at your notes, really trust in yourself, build this confidence, right? And then if you don't master it, that's okay. I'm not punishing you. I'm not shaming you. Nothing like that. Go back to your notes, take a look at it, and then do it again, right?
Yeah, revising's not that deep in my classroom. I'm just like, you got to fix it because you got to trust that you're going to be able to do it without me. That's what I tell them. I was like, I don't take the test for you. Like, so like, I kind of need you to do it by yourself.
Yes. Oh, I have so much in my brain right now. I love this. I love when people expand my brain, honestly, because sometimes I just get stuck in my ways and I'm just like, oh, this is how it should be done. And it's not. There's so many ways to do it.
It's that flexibility, Toni. We got to be flexible.
I know. And being adaptable, right? Like all these things as quote unquote good educators are.
Hey there, listeners. This is Zach, just dropping in with this week's announcements. First off, we're attending MassQ in Foxborough, Massachusetts from October 15th to 17th. And we have 4 of our teacher leaders presenting on the Modern Classrooms model, so come on out and find us if you're there. And second, as you've probably heard me say on previous episodes, we are hosting a book club with ScreenPal and Cami. The community has chosen to read UDL and Blended Learning by Katie Novak and Catlin Tucker. Join us in this 10-week community of practice to learn with and from educators across the country, receive premium access to both ScreenPal and Cami, and to deepen your understanding of UDL and blended learning. You can get your must-do reading pages for our third session, which is on Thursday, October 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Registration links are in the show notes. And now let's hear from Emily.
Hi everyone, Emily Dia here, Senior Director for Educator Support. I am wondering, are you an educator in Alabama, Baltimore, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Chicago, DC, LA, Minnesota, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, New York City, Oakland, St. Louis, or Tulsa County, Oklahoma? Then you're eligible to apply for one of our scholarships to work with a personal mentor and learn the MCP model through our self-paced virtual mentorship program. Applications are open now for our October and January sessions, and scholarship recipients receive a fully funded seat in the VMP and eligibility to earn a $500 stipend when you finish the course. The deadline for the October session is fast approaching, and seats are limited across all locations. Head to www.modernclassrooms.org/apply-now to learn more and submit your application. That's modernclassrooms.org/apply-now. We would love to learn with you this year.
Okay. So we were talking about independent work, right? There's this like video concept, there's the practice, and then the mastery checks. So my question now is collaboration. How does that look in your space? How do you prioritize collaboration? And how do you practice collaboration in your space?
So 9th graders and 10th graders are teenagers. So they're inherently very, very sociable. So at the very beginning of the year, I'm not like, it has to be a silent library, but I do immediately and consistently call out unproductive conversations. Like as soon as I start hearing that gossip, I was like, whoa, lock in. Like, no, we're not talking about that right now. But if I have to remind them again, I usually, like my phrasing is, if I can't trust you to work productively together, I'm going to separate you. And so that's where like the consequences come in. And so usually what will happen is if they don't listen, then I do a seat change. And so after like the first 2 weeks of doing so, they kind of get the gist. Like when I say be productive, like they know what I'm talking about and they're able to self-correct. But at the beginning of the year, and I guess like right now, I do try to pay attention to students who are on similar pace. So I have pulled like a handful of small groups. This is a new thing that I'm trying this year. But at the end of my small group interaction, I'll remind them like, hey, like, you are all on the same pace right now. Like these are the people you could talk to work together if you would like to. The other thing that I like to do is I really try my best very early on to lean on to the idea of my like peer tutors in the class. Like if you're ahead of pace and I haven't like interrupted you a billion times this week, which I try not to, by the way. I try to make sure that the people that I ask to assist me with other students, I haven't, like they've had their own time to process information and work. That I'm not the only expert in the room, right? Like if you've mastered the material, like that is my stamp of approval that you know what's going on. And so I trust you. Like I trust you to be able to guide another student's understanding, because if you understand the material, your perspective is actually unique and you may have insight that I don't have to be able to explain something. And I also remind them, it's like, yo, I'm an adult, right? Like sometimes being able to talk to your friends about something else makes more sense to you. And so if you've got that insight, like that's incredibly valuable. And I could really use your help bridging that gap for somebody else. And so yeah, that's usually what collaboration looks like in my classroom.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think, again, setting it up from the beginning, right? And then providing that opportunity to mess up and to practice what collaboration looks like. And then also here are ways to find folks to collaborate with, right? I love that. And so, you know how you were talking about, I call in or call out unproductive conversations right away, right? And you say it in a really nice way of like, ooh, that's not lock in, right? Lock in. I think for me, the way that I do it, which makes me chuckle, because then I'm thinking, wow, am I a quote unquote bad teacher? But when I hear my students talk about different things, I pop in. I'm like, oh, tell me more. Like, I want to know all the tea.
Now, I'm not saying like it's a little early in the year for me to be doing that, but that is absolutely where I am. Like,
Okay.
Like once the routine is set and I can like, relax my shoulders a bit, like, that's me. That's 100% me.
Oh, I am so curious how I'm going to survive when I get back in the classroom.
See, honestly, the gossip is the reason why I love teaching high school. Like,
yes. And then I would be, if they're cracking jokes or if like I had a student playing, whatever video games, I'd be like, oh, that's so dope. Like, tell me more about that. And then I engage with them for like 30 seconds and I'm like, okay, cool. Like get back to that once you do the things that the must do, right? Like, please. And so it provides this way of like, hey, I am paying attention to what you're interested in. I'm asking questions and I'm not reprimanding you, right? But I love this call out to Sabrina of saying like, hey, lock in. And also the call out of, hey, this is the beginning of the school year. I need to create the routines. And then once I have it locked in, I will start, the whole gradual release of like, what, tell me all the tea. I want to hear all the gossip. What's out there?
I'm in like beginning of the year brain where like structure.
Yes. Thank you for that reminder. Cause I would be like, girl, tell me more.
I'm slowly getting there. They're building my trust in their ability to do what they need to do. So.
Oh, I love that so much. And this praise also, or not praise, it's more the statement that you share with the students of, I am not the only expert in this room. Naming that already is so impactful in so many ways. And I feel like students really grasp or like just hang on to that of just saying, oh, wait a minute. It's not just my teacher. I could also be an expert in this in a different way, of course. And expert doesn't necessarily mean you know everything about it, right? It's just you know a good amount of information about it. You could always learn because learning is a forever thing. And so I love that you start this off with, I'm not the only expert in the room, y'all. And it's just your passive way of saying like, don't come ask me for help all the time.
I really lean into it in the sense that because I try to have really authentic, like real, like try helpful conversations with my students after this discussion. If I really feel like they've got it, I'd be like, hey, if another student has this question, can I ask you to help them out? And their answer could be no, right? But really like pushing it out like, hey, please don't forget what we just talked about, not only for your benefit, but like you may be able to assist me later on.
Oh, I love that, Sabrina. That's so good. Of like, if someone were to ask me this, can you also share? And then, like you said, it then becomes their thing to talk about, right? And then it makes you realize as an educator, did they actually understand what we talked about? Oh, goodness gracious, where have you been all my life? All right. So, like, one more question. Challenges. Let's talk about them because there are challenges, y'all. Nothing is perfect. Again, we're a little bit messy out here, and that's okay. So what are some challenges that you faced implementing this model, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Organization, Toni. Oh my goodness. I mean, when I was in school, like there was definitely like binder checks and like I had a table of contents in all of my classes. And so I've never really been on the teacher side of like doing binder checks before, but as my iterations of MCP have progressed, I realized like there has been a greater need. And I think a huge portion of my success for the start of this school year is not only the predictive classroom structure, but also like teaching them how to be organized. So I used to have a wall in my room where like it was just all the assignments and they just pull their folders, like pull from a folder something that they wanted. But then I kind of like that was it. That's all I gave them. Like I didn't give them a specific way to place things. I didn't give them a specific way to organize things. But this year I made it like my PDP goal to like help students be organized. So I ended up purchasing folders on my own dime just because I wanted to really try it out to see for their benefit. If like if I give you a folder, I want you to put your in-progress materials on the left side. So as soon as you open it up, you know exactly where you're doing. And then anything that you finish, you put it on the back. Anything that you are working on or finish, I'm expecting that pacing tracker to be marked. Like, I have built in time into my class periods at the start of the school year where, like, okay, at the end of class, like, before you pack up, like, don't rush. I need you to mark where you're at. And so I'll follow up that conversation the next day when they ask me, oh, what are we supposed to be doing? Because that is a very common question very early on into the school year. Like, what are we supposed to be doing? I'll say, pull out your pacing tracker. I see you didn't mark where you were at this point. Like, I have the one that's on the board that's public for everybody, but it doesn't tell you like what you were working on yesterday. That's your responsibility to keep track of. And so I say that's one of the biggest challenges is like being able to support students in their organization. And I found that the answer is provide the organization for them. Now, I'm sure there are issues that'll eventually pop up. Like for right now, I see I gave them too many like, what is it called? Sheet protectors. I thought putting sheet protectors in there would help them. It's not working. They can't figure out the sheet protectors.
Oh my gosh, how fun.
Or like sometimes the sheet protectors are too like rigid and so they have a hard time. Anyway, I digress. But other than teaching students to be organized, the other challenge that I faced with MCP was definitely like the first year like implementation for creation, right? Having to dedicate time to make the videos and like have the guided notes and make the pacing trackers. It can be very, very daunting. But my recommendation is anyone who's listening who wants to do this, if you are working with a PLC, a PLT, like one other teacher who is also doing that course with you, like share the load, like share the love, share the lesson creation. So me and Ms. Hamilton, we have like 50-50 like video creation right now. Like half of the videos or half of the lessons were made by me personally, and half the videos were made from her, which I think helped significantly. So if there's anybody else that you can like buddy up with to do videos or anything, like that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I would even add on too. There were 4 English teachers when we implemented this model, and we shared the workload. And so students were able to watch videos not just created by me, but also created by other 3 teachers. And then it created this community of like everyone is actually our student. Like, oh, I really like how Ms. D is saying this, so I'm going to go to Ms. D and like have conversations about this specific skill. So the whole like 200 students that we had, they were all our students, and it became such a close community, and it also showcased other teachers. So my students were like, oh, that's Miss Reina or Miss Kolb or Miss Mariucci. Like that, I've heard your voice. I even had the math teacher come in and record a video as well, like one of the 6th grade math teachers. And my students were like, wait a minute, that's my math teacher. And it's just so cool. Like you get to really be creative with it. And of course, like if that math teacher, the math teacher that I asked had time.
Yeah.
And they wanted to help me out. And we had it was a fun time creating. So highly, highly recommend finding that partner to create and have fun creating. And so if you mess up, you mess up. Keep it on there. Kids actually really love the mistakes. And I chuckled with the sheet protectors because those things still exist. LOL. I feel like, girl, what? We still use that.
I thought I was being smart, okay? Because like, I guess like at least in my school, the trend has been like no more binders. I want folders instead.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, because they have 7 classes, right? Like who wants like 7 binders? And so I was like, oh yeah, if I give them a sheet protector to put in their folder, maybe they'll hold on to it now. Like no.
Yeah. No, things fall out more in those sheet protectors. And like you said, then they take the time to like try to put the things in, and then now they're just wasting time, bruh. Like, yes. And these are things that you got to think about too. And you don't think about it until you do it. And you're like, oh, that was actually a really bad idea. And I love this focus on organization as well, right? Super important. And me being neurodivergent, I kind of chuckle looking back now of how organized I was in the classroom. And time and time again, I say this, y'all, when students can see how you move, they
Mm-hmm.
mirror it.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept a really clean classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So my classroom was clean, immaculate. Yep. My students were cleaning, yep. wiping, making sure nothing was on the floor. Mm-hmm. And then I liked my binders or my materials a certain way.
Yep.
And so students know, oh, we got to put it back this way. So again, it's just like this
yep.
modeling, and students pick it up and they mirror it. And so the organization is like, yes, we would love for them to figure out how to stay organized no matter the age.
Yeah.
And it is also so much better and less stressful for you as an educator when you teach your students how to organize something, because it's different in each classes.
That's maybe been my reflection from the last, I guess, like so far in my years teaching is like, it actually really helps to be explicit. Like,
yes.
assuming that a student knows something is, a little rocky road.
Right. Assume nothing.
Yeah, just like take some time to just be very literal and be very clear. It's really helped out my communication with my students.
And model, repeat. Like you all know as educators, we repeat ourselves like 10 billion times, and that is okay. And so give yourself grace, give your students grace. Like this is a whole just an interesting way of shifting, right? And so we need to have a lot of patience. Okay, well, thank you for all of that, Sabrina. What do you hope to see in the future? What goals do you have? Because it's your third year implementing. What does the future hold for you?
So I've had a lot of qualitative data. I guess students just telling me how helpful my class has been for them. But really my goal is for 100% of all of my foundation students to be proficient on the Math 1 EOC. Like, I think that's really like my driving force here. Like everything that I do in foundations is to like set that win up for them, because I think that'd be a huge confidence builder, but also kind of like a cycle breaker for some of my students. So that's kind of my goal. And I've already been praised by my assistant principals on the success of my class. And I really attribute MCP to be like a huge vital component of that success. So in a perfect world, like right now, 100%. I'm aiming for 100% passing at the end of the year.
Oh, we got this. It's going to happen. We're going to put it out in the world. You release it. It's going to happen. And we're going to celebrate when it does happen.
Yeah, it's like aim for the star. Wait, no, what is it? Like you shoot from the moon, and if you don't make it, you still land among the stars. Like that's where I'm at right now. I know 100% is, not perfectly, like that's not a reasonable goal, but that's where my sights are at.
I love it. And I'm sure you will reach it. So Sabrina, how can our listeners connect with you? Because as I have been in education for a while, and you are still teaching me so many different things. So how can our listeners connect with you?
Okay, this is really silly. I was actually talking to my sister about this. I no longer maintain a public teacher social media account, but I am a competitive speed puzzler, and I do post publicly that way. I don't feel super comfortable sharing my email out right now. But if you find me on Instagram, it is at puzzle_bites. Like that is the public way that you can reach me. If you send me a message saying that you wanted to know more about MCP, I am more than happy to share my email and send you resources that way, especially if you are a Foundations of Math 1 teacher in North Carolina. I got all the things. If you need anything, I got you. So feel free to DM me on my Instagram, and I'd be happy to share resources.
Yes, y'all, shoot that shot. That's what I say all the time. And I am now going to follow you on Instagram because I have to watch this. I don't even know what speed puzzling is, but I am excited.
Oh, that's another conversation. I'm baby influencer there, by the way.
Okay, baby influencer. I love that.
I don't even know if I can quantify as an influencer, but I just started it. It's a very brand new thing. I have got some followers, so I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I love this. This is so exciting because again, that's something I've never heard of. I've talked about word search, the speed word search. I love word search. I'm I want to compete.
Well, okay. So Toni, I have homework for you, and I have homework for anybody who's listening. You got to check out the World Jigsaw Puzzle competitions that are happening in Spain right now. It's a huge thing right now in the puzzle community, and it's really exciting to watch. I mean, if you like puzzles.
I love puzzles. I love puzzles, meaning I buy puzzles and then I have a puzzle mat and I have all the things I need to start a puzzle I have not started yet. I'm going to get there. Well, Sabrina, this was so much fun. It brought me joy today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. This brought me joy talking to you too, Toni. I really appreciated this opportunity.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with us. Listeners, remember, you can always email us at podcast@modernclassrooms.org, and you can find the show notes for this episode at podcast.modernclassrooms.org/210. We'll have this episode's video uploaded on Modern Classroom's YouTube channel and transcript uploaded by Friday, so be sure to check back to access those. Also, we're asking our listeners to leave a review if this podcast has been helpful in supporting you to create a human-centered learning environment through a blended, self-paced, mastery-based model. It does help other folks find it. Thank you all for listening. Have a great week, and we'll be back next Sunday.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find links to topics and tools we discussed in our show notes for this episode. And remember, you can learn more about our work at www.modernclassrooms.org, and you can learn the essentials of our model through our free course at learn.modernclassrooms.org. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at modernclassproj, that's Proj. We are so appreciative of all you do for students and schools. Have a great week, and we'll be back next Sunday with another episode of the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.